I am Emma Walker, 34 years old, and I sell fish at a night market in a forgotten coastal town in Jackson, Mississippi. I live in a small rented apartment above a closed bakery, and every morning I wake before dawn to help my paralyzed parents dress, eat, and face another day that depends entirely on my hands. This is not the life people expected of me. 3 years ago, my name meant luxury, power, and envy. Today, it means nothing, and that is exactly why I am still alive. After my divorce, I disappeared. I changed my phone number, my address, and every legal record that could be traced. I took my parents and left without looking back. Everyone we left behind believed I was throwing a tantrum, that I would eventually return and beg for reconciliation. They were wrong. For 3 years, there was no word from me, not because I was hiding, but because I was done. The illusion broke one night when an old acquaintance recognized me behind a stall of melting ice and raw fish. He stared as if he had seen a ghost and asked where I had gone, and when I would finally forgive my ex-husband, Lucas Kane. He said my name with pity, as if I were still the woman who waited patiently at home while her husband ruled the world. I did not answer him. I kept cutting fish, because forgiveness was never part of my escape. Lucas and I had been married for 8 years. To the outside world, we were flawless. He was wealthy, admired, untouchable. I was his elegant wife, always silent, always loyal. Then he fell obsessively in love with a young actress named Claire Young, a woman the media called pure and harmless. He spoiled her openly, protected her fiercely, and turned her into a symbol of his power. Everyone in our circle knew she was his, and no one dared to touch her. I was expected to endure it quietly. Instead, I resisted, and that was when my marriage stopped being a relationship and became a prison. I learned that love can rot into ownership, and devotion can become a weapon. What happened after that was not an accident, and it was not a misunderstanding. It was a slow, deliberate destruction that forced me to choose between disappearing forever or dying where I stood. This is the story of how I chose to vanish. I am telling it now not for sympathy, and not for justice, but for clarity. I want the truth to exist somewhere beyond court files and locked memories. I want people to understand that disappearance is sometimes the last form of self-defense left to a woman who has been erased while still breathing. If you are listening, understand this from the beginning. Nothing that follows was sudden. Everything was earned. I survived by leaving, and this opening is only the first breath after years underwater in absolute silence. I married Lucas Kane, believing that time would soften him. I was wrong. In the beginning, he was attentive in a way that felt intoxicating, like being chosen by a man who never lost. He controlled boardrooms, headlines, and people, and when he looked at me, I thought that power stopped. For years, I told myself that was love. By the 8th year of our marriage, I learned it was only possession wearing a beautiful mask. Claire Young entered our lives quietly, introduced as a rising actress who needed guidance and protection. Lucas spoke her name with an excitement he had not used with me in years. At first, I dismissed it as vanity, another toy for a powerful man. But soon, the world around us shifted. He canceled meetings to answer her calls. He moved contracts to accommodate her schedule. He bought her anything she admired for more than a second. In our social circle, people stopped pretending. Everyone knew Claire was untouchable. She was his indulgence, his symbol, his open secret. I was expected to smile and endure. That was the unspoken rule. A wife in my position did not confront, did not question, did not embarrass her husband. I tried to follow that rule until it began to suffocate me. The first time I confronted Claire was not planned. It happened at a public event, surrounded by people who watched closely, pretending not to see. My anger spilled over, raw and unfiltered, and I pushed her away from me. The sound of bodies hitting water echoed louder than my thoughts. Lucas did not look at me with shock. He looked at me as if I had damaged something he owned. To appease her, he abandoned a billion-dollar deal and flew her to Iceland to watch the northern lights. I stayed behind, managing the silence he left. That was when I made my second mistake. I withdrew my support from her career, quietly, legally, efficiently. Lucas found out within hours. His response was not an argument, it was punishment. He locked me in the wine cellar for months, cutting me off from the world, returning only to demand apologies that meant nothing. I learned then how easily love could turn into confinement. The third time I acted was out of desperation, not anger. I helped Claire leave the country, believing that distance would end the obsession. I thought removing her would restore balance. Instead, it shattered whatever restraint Lucas had left. That night, he brought my parents to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I arrived to the smell of fuel and fear, my hands shaking so badly I could barely stand. He stood there calmly, watching his men pour gasoline near where my parents were restrained. He asked me one question: where was Claire? I asked him if he would truly kill them if I refused. He looked at me with an expression colder than hatred and told me I could try him. I did not. I gave him the address. I watched him leave without a backward glance, as if my parents were an inconvenience he had already resolved. When I reached the warehouse, he mentioned, flames were already climbing the walls. I screamed until my voice broke. I tried to reach them, but the heat forced me back. My parents, injured and terrified, still found the strength to push me away, to keep me from rushing into something that would kill us all. The sound of collapsing metal still lives in my chest. When I woke in the hospital, I cried into their arms, apologizing for choosing the wrong man. My mother told me it was not my fault. My father said it was time to leave. That was when they told me the truth they had never shared. Before my marriage, they had insisted Lucas sign a legal agreement. If he betrayed me, the divorce would be immediate, and our family would be allowed to disappear without interference. Lucas had signed it, arrogant and distracted, never believing it would matter. I realized then that my parents had been protecting me long before I understood I needed protection. The next day, I did two things. I took the agreement to a lawyer, who confirmed its validity. Then I began the process of erasing our legal existence. It would take 5 days. 5 days where I had to pretend nothing had changed. I returned to the Kane estate and played the role of the obedient wife. Inside, I dismantled my life piece by piece. I burned gifts that once felt sacred. I destroyed symbols of promises that had already rotted. Each day was a countdown. I cut the flowers he had planted for me. I removed locks we had placed together. I let the house empty itself of my presence. By the time the charity auction arrived, I was already gone in everything but name. Standing beside Lucas and Claire, enduring whispers and humiliation, I reminded myself that endurance was temporary. Freedom was permanent, and Lucas Kane had no idea how close he was to losing the one thing he believed could never leave him. When I returned to the Kane estate, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled when spoken to, answered politely, and moved through rooms like a shadow that obeyed. Inside, everything in me was already severed. I was only waiting for the law to finish what my heart had completed. Each day felt borrowed, like time granted to someone who had already died. I started by erasing myself quietly. In our bedroom stood a glass case filled with preserved roses, 520 of them, arranged by Lucas himself to prove eternity. He once told me each rose represented a promise. I ordered a metal basin, lit charcoal, and dropped them in, one by one. The petals curled and blackened, releasing a scent that made my chest ache. I watched until nothing remained but ash. That night, I slept without dreams. The following morning, I took scissors to the violet garden he had planted for me. He claimed he chose violets because they were resilient and loyal. I cut until my hands ached, until the soil was littered with broken stems. On the third day, I went alone to the mountain temple where we had once sworn devotion. I found the lock we had placed together, heavy with rust and years. I unlocked it, tossed it into the sea, and walked away without turning back. Whatever remained between us sank silently into dark water. That evening, Lucas's assistant delivered a gown and informed me of a charity auction. Lucas required my presence. I understood why immediately. Public appearances were currency, and he wanted to spend me. When I arrived, I saw Claire Young standing beside him, radiant and fragile, in a dress he had chosen. I asked him why I was there if she already occupied my place. He smiled thinly and accused me of jealousy, as if my dignity were a childish tantrum. The room whispered. People watched. Someone misidentified her as Mrs. Kane, then corrected themselves with embarrassment. Claire lowered her eyes and apologized softly, performing humility with practiced precision. My nails cut into my palms as I reminded myself I only needed 2 more days. At the auction, every time I bid, Claire raised the price by a single dollar. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I lifted my paddle higher, unflinching. I had the legal right to do so. I was still his wife, and the assets were still shared. I told her calmly that no matter what Lucas gave her, she would never replace me. Her eyes filled with tears on cue. She fled the room. Lucas grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise and demanded to know why I forced her away. I told him her choices had nothing to do with me. He shoved me aside and ran after her, leaving me standing alone beneath 100 curious gazes. That night, I barely slept. Near dawn, my phone vibrated with an alert that froze my blood. An auction had gone live online. The items were private videos of me. Only Lucas had those files. He had recorded them when he said distance hurt him and he wanted something to remember me by. When I called him, he laughed and asked if I enjoyed bidding so much. If I did not want the videos to spread, I should keep bidding until I learned my place. I rushed to the auction house, my hands shaking as I forced myself through the doors. The screen displayed my body, exposed to strangers. I felt myself disappear inch by inch as eyes devoured what had once been intimate. I raised my paddle again and again, buying back fragments of myself at unbearable cost. With each bid, something inside me went quiet. By the final video, the love I once believed in had completely died. When I stepped outside, Lucas called to mock me. I asked him if he feared divorce. He sounded amused. Without his consent, he said, I could never leave. He had forgotten the agreement. The next horror came swiftly. Claire's apartment caught fire that night. She claimed it was an accident, a candle knocked over, and insisted I had nothing to do with it. Lucas did not listen. He dragged me to the hospital and declared I was responsible for her injuries. He ordered doctors to harvest skin from my thigh to graft onto hers. No anesthesia. He said pain would ensure better results. I screamed until my voice vanished. For a moment, I saw hesitation in his eyes, a flicker of something human. Then he turned away. After the surgery, he stayed by my bed briefly, speaking as if nothing irreversible had happened. He said he still loved me most. He said I should apologize to Claire, and everything would return to normal. When doctors announced Claire needed blood, Lucas ordered mine taken, despite warnings. I agreed. I did not want anyone else harmed because of me. As the blood drained, the world dimmed. I woke the next afternoon, weak and hollow. Lucas arrived with a box of pastries I once loved. He told me weekends would be mine, weekdays hers. He called it compromise. I said goodbye calmly. He did not understand. As soon as he left, a message arrived. The erasure was complete. I removed the IV myself, ignored the nurses, and walked out carrying nothing but a bag I had prepared long ago. By the time Lucas realized I was gone, I was already past the point of return. By the time Lucas understood I was truly gone, the law had already severed what his power never could. The agreement he had signed years ago activated without ceremony, without confrontation, without asking his permission. There was no dramatic court appearance, no public spectacle. The divorce existed the moment the documents were verified. Quiet, immediate, final. I boarded the plane with my parents that same evening. My body was still weak from blood loss, every step measured, every breath shallow, but my mind had never been clearer. At the security checkpoint, my mother clutched my arm as if afraid I might disappear again. I promised her I would not. I only removed the life that had been killing us. When we reached our seats, I took out my phone, removed the SIM card, and dropped it into the trash. I slipped the wedding ring from my finger and left it there too. I did not cry. I had already spent all my tears. While the plane lifted into the dark, Lucas sat beside Claire watching a movie, his arm around her shoulders. He felt something tighten in his chest, an unfamiliar emptiness that annoyed him more than frightened him. He asked her what was wrong with the sound. She smiled and leaned closer. He told himself the feeling was nothing. He had always believed I would return. I always had. 3 days passed before irritation became unease. Claire tried everything she knew to keep his attention, but it no longer worked. The novelty faded quickly once he no longer had to fight for it. He checked his phone repeatedly, annoyed that my messages had stopped entirely. I had done exactly what he claimed he wanted, and somehow that unsettled him. On the 4th day, he drove back to the estate. The house greeted him with darkness. No lights, no movement. He walked through room after room, calling my name, growing louder each time, anger replacing uncertainty. But the house was empty. Dust had settled. Flowers had died. My belongings were gone. Even the violets were missing. That was the moment panic finally surfaced. He called me. The number no longer existed. He called my parents. Same response. He contacted staff, lawyers, investigators. No one could find us. His confidence began to crack. He told himself I was hiding to punish him, that I would reappear once fear took hold. He had always believed I needed him more than he needed me. The report arrived a week later. His assistant stood in front of him, voice barely steady, explaining that the divorce had been legally executed using a premarital agreement Lucas himself had signed. The document had allowed immediate dissolution upon infidelity. My parents and I had also terminated our household registrations and left the country. There were no current records, no addresses, no contacts. Lucas stared at the file until the words blurred. Slowly, memory returned. The signature, the day he had laughed and signed without reading, certain nothing could ever touch him. Rage followed, hot and violent. He ordered everyone out and destroyed his office in silence. Not because he loved me, because he had lost control. His anger turned outward. Evidence surfaced revealing Claire's manipulations, the staged tears, the provocations. The recordings were undeniable. He confronted her with fury he had once reserved for me. She begged, denied, pleaded. It did not matter. He ensured she paid for every humiliation she had engineered, then discarded her without ceremony. It brought him no relief. Months passed. He traveled constantly, chasing rumors of my presence across continents. Each lead dissolved into nothing. I was always gone before he arrived. Slowly, exhaustion replaced obsession. His body thinned, his eyes darkened. Regret crept in not as love, but as loss. He had believed ownership was permanence. He had been wrong. In a small coastal town far from his world, I built a life so quiet it almost felt unreal. I learned the rhythm of tides and markets, of simple routines and honest labor. My parents healed slowly. We spoke little of the past. It no longer needed language. Peace arrived in fragments at first, then stayed. One evening, I received a message forwarded through legal channels. Lucas had found me. He asked for a meeting. He promised apologies, explanations, repentance. He offered to sign anything, give everything, even surrender his fortune. I read the message once and closed it. There was nothing left to discuss. He arrived at the restaurant anyway. When he saw me, he froze. I was different, not because of age or injury, but because he no longer existed in my world. He stepped forward, voice trembling, begging me to listen. I did, calmly, without emotion. I told him the truth. He had never loved me. He loved the version of himself reflected in my obedience. When that reflection broke, he tried to destroy the mirror. I told him that if he truly wanted redemption, he would leave and never return. He reached for me. I stepped back. Ethan stood then, placing himself between us without a word. He did not threaten. He did not posture. He simply existed as proof that love could stand without domination. Lucas looked at him, then at me, and finally understood something too late. He had already lost. When Lucas left, he did not look back. I did not watch him go. My life had moved forward long before that moment. I did not need his suffering to validate my freedom. He would carry his choices for the rest of his life. I would not. Some endings do not require revenge. Some only require absence. I did not rebuild my life with noise or celebration. There was no moment where the sky opened or justice felt dramatic. What came instead was quiet, and at first, that quiet terrified me. I had lived so long inside chaos that peace felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. But day by day, I learned that safety does not need witnesses, and freedom does not need applause. In this small northern town, I am not defined by who I was married to or what I endured. I am known as the woman who shows up before dawn, who keeps her word, who takes care of her parents without complaint. My hands are rough now, my back often sore, but every ache belongs to a life I chose. I fall asleep knowing no one will demand anything from my body, my silence, or my loyalty. That certainty is worth more than all the luxury I once lived in. My parents rarely speak about the past. We understand each other without revisiting it. They gave me more than protection when they planned an escape long before I knew I needed one. They gave me permission to survive without shame. Sometimes my mother watches me across the dinner table with quiet pride, and I know she is not mourning what I lost. She is grateful for what I kept. Ethan never asked me to promise forever. He never tried to replace the years that were taken from me. He stood beside me without stepping into my shadow, without trying to own my healing. He taught me that love can exist without fear, without contracts built on control, without the constant need to prove devotion. With him, I am not careful. I am simply present. People often believe that leaving is the easy choice. They imagine escape as cowardice, endurance as strength. They do not understand how much courage it takes to walk away from everything you were trained to protect. I did not leave because I was weak. I left because I finally understood that staying would cost me my life, even if my body survived. I do not hate Lucas. Hate would mean he still occupies space in me, and he does not. What he feels now is the echo of his own actions, not something I carry or control. I did not need revenge to move forward. I needed distance, law, and the courage to disappear completely. If someone hears my story and wonders what they would do in my place, I hope they remember this. Love that demands your silence is not love. Loyalty that requires your suffering is not virtue, and endurance is not noble when it destroys you. Sometimes the bravest ending is not staying to prove your worth, but leaving to protect it. I vanished once because it was the only way to survive. Now I live openly, honestly, and without fear. This is not the life I was promised. It is the life I chose. And for the first time, that choice belongs entirely to me.